When it comes to real-time strategy games, there are several big standouts. Dune 2, Warcraft, StarCraft, and Command & Conquer come to mind. These seminal games helped establish RTS games as a popular genre. The established tropes of building a base, harvesting resources, recruiting units, capturing important landmarks, and battling opponents have created a solid base many games have found success with, even with a bit of tweaking. And then Warhammer 40k came after them for glory. Warhammer 40k is a very popular wargame franchise, most well known for the tabletop game, where players control small armies of units in simulated warfare. 40k has a rich history and tons of playable factions. Both factor up to it making perfect sense for there to be video games that share this same universe. And these games are numerous. Action games, turn-based strategy, first-person shooters, third-person rail shooters, but perhaps most prominently, real-time strategy. It should not be surprising that one of the most popular genres for 40k games is the one that closely emulates the warfare that rules tables. The apparent pinnacle of digital 40k media is the Dawn of War series. The first Dawn of War game, released for PC in 2004 by Relic, took the formula established by games like Dune and StarCraft and all but perfected it. Based off of the engine used for Company of Heroes, the core game introduces 4 playable factions. The zealous juggernauts of the Space Marines, the demonically corrupt Chaos Marines, the wild swarm known as the Orcs, and the elegant and devious Eldar. Each faction follows the established RTS patterns, but have differences that make each of them distinct. The Space Marines are well-rounded and can fit in almost any playstyle. The Chaos Marines are most like more aggressive Space Marines and love to overwhelm with big, powerful units. Orcs are masters of swarming enemies and have a special unit resource. Eldar are fragile and elusive, so they strike from a distance or from stealth. Gameplay happens in real time, hence the genre name, and players control a commander unit. Others can be recruited from various buildings, who often have special abilities as well as the army they lead. The main campaign follows Gabriel Angelos, chapter master of the Blood Ravens. The Blood Ravens are a renowned chapter of the Space Marines, known for being especially fierce combatants, but also hoarders of knowledge because they've lost their home world. The Blood Ravens arrive on Tartarus in response to distress signals from Imperial Guardsmen. Beset by orcs, they requested help and got it in spades. Angelos leads his chapter across the world, winning hard-fought victories. Angelos and his best friend Isidore, a powerful psychic known as a chapter librarian, start getting weird scans from the planet. What they discover is that Chaos Marines have been manipulating orcs so that they can carry out their own nefarious plans. Blood Ravens also encounter the Eldar, who are on the planet for their own reasons. Angelos eventually comes face to face with demonic forces summoned by the Chaos Marines. It turns out the Eldar, led by Farseer Maka, were there to stop this from happening in the first place, but consider themselves higher than all others when it comes to combating chaos. Dawn of War received 3 expansion packs, the first of which was Winter Assault in 2005, which brought several tweaks with it as well as a new playable faction, the Imperial Guard. Guardsmen are much weaker than any other faction, but are extremely numerous and have some of the best artillery of any faction. The Imperial Guardsmen arrive on the planet Lorne 5 upon getting a distress call from a group of Space Marines trying to recover a long-lost war machine known as a Titan. The Guardsmen form an alliance with the Eldar, led by Farseer Taldir, as they fight to stop Orcs and Chaos Marines from getting their hands on the Titan. One of the 2 armies of allies, chosen by the player via gameplay, ultimately succeeds, but upon claiming the Titan, a powerful force that the Eldar had been fearing arrives, the Necrons. These deathless artificial lifeforms besiege the Titan, and are barely stopped by its powerful weapons. There is a second campaign in Winter Assault. The Guardsmen and Eldar campaign is the Order side, and the Orcs and Chaos Marines are the Chaos side. The Chaos campaign focuses on a new Orc war boss known as Gorguts, and a Chaos Marine cult leader named Kroll. The 2 form an uneasy alliance to fight the forces of Order as they each try to claim the Titan for their own. This is an alternate story to the Order campaign, so when someone claims the Titan, the Necrons still attack. The interesting thing about these two campaigns is that any faction can claim the Titan based on player choice. Either the Guardsmen or the Eldar can win the Order campaign as I stated, and either the Orcs or the Chaos Marines can do the same for Chaos. The next expansion was Dark Crusade, released in 2006. Dark Crusade introduced two new factions, the diplomatic yet warfaring Tau, and the aforementioned Necron. Tau have some of the most advanced weaponry in the entire franchise, and the Necron harness the power of death itself. The campaign is drastically different in Dark Crusade. Instead of the campaign focusing on a faction or two, the player is allowed to select one of the 7 factions and conquer a continent of the planet Cronus. This makes it much more open-ended, as players can choose where to attack or fortify as their opponents try to do the same. Territories on Cronus come in 3 varieties. Some territories give you a unit known as an Honor Guard who will join your commander unit in battle. Some territories give global bonuses, such as extra resources each turn or an extra base building while attacking. And the last type of territory is a capital territory. Each faction's starting territory, their capital, is a unique encounter and is where the story of Dark Crusade happens. Whenever attacking a capital territory, as long as the original faction still controls it, there is unique dialogue between the two leaders. 2008's Soulstorm was the third and last expansion of Dawn of War. 2 new factions were introduced, the devout Amazons of the Sisters of Battle, and the selfish rogues known as the Dark Eldar. The Sisters of Battle are part of the Imperium of Man, much like the Space Marines and Imperial Guardsmen, and are somewhat a balance of both, being more numerous than the Marines, but hardier than the Guardsmen, and they absolutely love fire. Dark Eldar are really just evil Eldar, pretty much. They're still kinda squishy, and like to fight using trickery and distance. Campaign gameplay of Soulstorm is very similar to Dark Crusade, but is instead spread out over 3 planets and 2 moons. Further gameplay tweaking took place, plus the inclusion of flying units. Dawn of War feels like a culmination of all classic real-time strategy games. There's less micromanagement in that minions don't gather resources, most combat units are summoned in squads of 2 to 10, etc., etc. So combat can be at the forefront of attention. Each faction is similar enough so learning one after playing another is manageable, but different enough that preferences can be established. I personally favor the Space Marines for having good defense, and the Tau for having good units with ridiculous range so as to avoid being swarmed as easily. Each faction also has some of the most fun vehicles to use. The word I'd use to sum up my total gameplay of Dawn of War 1 would be fun. It isn't a perfect game by any means, and I can honestly say that I had way more fun with Dawn of War 1 than I've had with almost any other similar RTS game. Maybe the only game I would put above it is Warcraft 3. I enjoy some of Dawn of War's characters, but few of them have serious depth. Graphics may not be very advanced for the time, but considering the amount of crap that can be happening at once, I can let that slide. I never really had any slowdown, so the game seems competently programmed to handle the mess. I had one persistent graphics issue though, quick black flashes, but I think it was a software compatibility issue since this is a 14-year-old game and it never affected gameplay. The biggest problem I had, and I had it a lot, was unit pathfinding. Since you control squads of units, getting a large group of squads to all attack a single target can be cumbersome. Squad units move independently, so if one unit of a squad of 10 is in range of, let's say, a building, and the others cannot easily get in range, only that one will be attacking, while the others twiddle their thumbs. As often as this happened to me, it was only ever really a problem because I had other units in their way, so it was more my fault than anything else. I did have a few frustrating defeats along the way, but I see them more as punishing me for not adapting to the goal of the mission at hand. I would give this game and its expansions a total of 4 out of 5. It is probably the RTS I have spent the most time playing ever, and I love it. The campaign of Dark Crusade was a standout for me, both years ago when I first played it, and when I was playing it now for Wayward Let's Play. After I finished recording gameplay, I also did a playthrough of Soulstorm's campaign as the Tau, and liked it. I don't know why Dark Crusade is just more fun. The Order campaign for Winter Assault was not fun, I will openly admit that. Guardsmen and Eldar are far too similarly squishy to be teamed up like that, and that's just not how I like to play. The campaign of the core game does just kind of end, and the loose thread of the ending still has yet to be tied up, which is frustrating. In 2009, Relic released Dawn of War 2 for PC. Not wanting to rest on their laurels, Relic changed up the gameplay in a fairly significant way. Instead of controlling up to a small army of units, you control up to 4 squads of specific units, including a commander unit. The commander is the player character, and you pick the other units. Base building is no longer an important aspect of gameplay, with the only base building aspect existing being capturing transmitters and up to 2 important buildings per map. In multiplayer skirmishes, you do have a single base fortification that recruits units based on resources that passively get gathered, but other buildings tend not to get built. These differences changes the focus of the game. It is no longer about large-scale warfare. Combat is now presented as having a small group of warriors fighting against entire areas of enemies. It's much more confiding, which makes sense since you're a small group invading a held position usually. You don't have a base, you just have your equipment and your allies. Units are still controlled in a classic RTS fashion, but now each squad of units can be customized. Dawn of War 2 introduced RPG elements, such as leveling and customizable equipment, which makes sense for a small-scale game. Dawn of War 2 starts out with 3 playable factions: the Space Marines, the Orcs, and the Eldar. With there being a focus on less unit types, units are now more unique between factions, especially the commander units, though the general race archetypes carry over from the first game. The campaign for Dawn of War 2 focuses again on the Blood Ravens. Players control a player-named commander, and I named mine Butts because, well, Butts, and they arrive on Calderis, one of the recruiting worlds for the Blood Ravens. After fighting off orcs that were threatening the cities, you also come across the Eldar on another planet. Like in the first game, they seem to be there in response to a threat that hasn't come about yet. Well, again, that threat comes up. The 3 worlds are attacked by a force known as the Tyranids. Best described as mutant plant bugs, Tyranids are a hive mind swarm that begins invading the 3 main recruiting worlds. The player leads the Blood Ravens from planet to planet freely, able to choose from several areas to dispatch their forces into. Many optional missions, played for experience or loot, have a limited time frame for completion. After fighting off orcs and Eldar, the Tyranids pose a different threat. Players must manage an infestation level on each planet. The level rises if the player doesn't do missions on a planet, and it falls if certain missions are done. Eventually, a plan is devised and put into place to fight back the Tyranids, but only narrowly so. The first expansion for Dawn of War 2 was Chaos Rising, released in 2010. Taking place 1 year after the end of the core game, players still control their named commander. The major inclusion this time was the Chaos Marines. The story is about Aurelia, the founding world of the Blood Ravens, popping into existence in the system that bears its name. Detecting Blood Raven transmissions from the surface of the planet, an investigative forces launch. What they find gets to the very heart of what the kind of corruption chaos can spread. And that isn't just a plot point. Throughout the missions, the players are often given choices that are considered good or bad, redeeming or corrupting, respectively. Units have purity meters that are affected by in-mission choices and certain pieces of gear. If a unit is totally pure, they get access to more powerful equipment. As a unit gets more and more corrupted, they get access to more powerful abilities. This is woven into some of the climactic moments of the game, as whoever is the most corrupt betrays the Blood Ravens. There is special dialogue and fights for each character being corrupted, and there's even one for if no unit is corrupted by the end of the game. Players eventually face off with a powerful demon whose summoning, while incomplete, is impossible to stop. The second expansion for Dawn of War 2, released in 2011, is Retribution. Playable as a standalone game, Retribution allows for gameplay akin to the first game without not being the same kind of game as the core of DOW2. Players are able to build a single building base at predetermined places on maps and recruit units. Units are still paid for with requisition of power, but those are gathered as loot instead of harvested. This allows for larger armies, making maps more chaotic and fun. Unlike the core game in Chaos Rising, players are able to choose freely from any of the 6 main factions of Dawn of War, including the Tyranids. Each faction has its own reasons for being on Typhon, one of the previously mentioned planets of Subsector Aurelia. The Imperial Inquisitors have decided the sector just needs to not be a thing anymore, and have decided to wipe out each planet with an Exterminatus. Exterminatus literally destroys a planet. The faction you choose somehow survives with their goals of dominance having come to an explosive end. Eventually, it becomes a race to stop the corrupt leader of the Blood Ravens, Librarian Kyrus, from summoning an extremely powerful demon. Yes, even the Chaos Marines want to stop him, since they want the attention from the Chaos Gods instead of him. I'm going to go ahead and say this now. There's a special co-op mode called The Last Stand. Players choose one of the faction leaders and, along with up to 2 other players, face off against increasingly difficult hordes of enemies. I did not play this, but the mode is popular enough to be mentioned here. Dawn of War 2 is an odd game in total. It feels like Relic wanted to try something different, but clearly felt like they changed too much since they went back to at least a unit recruitment in the last expansion. Dawn of War 2 definitely told a more cohesive story as far as I can judge, with focus being on characters who represent each major class. The Orc Commander in Retribution, surprisingly not Gorguts, is an absolute joy and maybe my second favorite character in all of the Dawn of War games, despite only being present in Retribution. By the way, Blood Flag is the second only to Gorguts in this regard. I give Dawn of War 2 a 3 out of 5. Overall, I felt like it dragged on longer than the first game, despite it taking nearly 20 hours less to play all the way through. I can appreciate the changes they made, and the game definitely works for what it is. I just really didn't enjoy it that much. Being able to focus on interpersonal relationships of the characters is nice, but the first Dawn of War did that with Angelos and Isidore. Actually seeing the effects of chaos on a Space Marine is a cool touch, but again, Isidore from the first game showed that. Unfairly or not, I can't get over the thought that Dawn of War 2 merely survives in the first game's shadow instead of thriving away from it. Dawn of War 3 was released in 2017 for PC. It once again focuses on Gabriel, Angelos, and Gorguts for the Space Marines and Orcs, with Farsi and Maka from the first game returning for the Eldar, replacing Farsi or Taldir. Taldir died canonically during the events of Winter Assault, but her soul lives on in a Soul Stone, seen in Dawn of War 2 Retribution, who plays a bigger role in this game. The game starts out on Cyprus Ultima, a world ruled by nobles who are famed for taking arms in massive suits of armor known as knights. All 3 races converge on Cyprus for their own reasons. The Orcs invade, but because that's what they do. The Space Marines show up to help defend from the Orcs, and the Eldar do what they often do. Show up because they sense a greater threat on the horizon, and never ask for help from others. Turns out a warp world, known as Acheron, like Aurelia, pops into existence, but this time, it's not a looming danger on the planet. It's a weapon. A spear, blessed by the Eldar god Cain, said to be able to slay any foe with one strike. Allegiances are forged and broken, battles waged, demons slain, and eventually a spear claimed, sort of. As far as gameplay goes, Dawn of War 3 threads the line between the first 2 games. Base building returns like in the first game, though not as heavily. Gameplay still focuses around the hero units like the second game, but with larger armies around them. This seems like a natural evolution for the series, and I like it. I thought the narrative beats of the first game to be inconsistent at best, considering the core game and Winter Assault had good stories, but Dark Crusade and Soulstone didn't really have campaigns that could tell compelling stories. and I didn't like the lack of serious base building in the series game. This is a good balance. Dawn of War 3 tells a much more integrated narrative than its predecessors. Throughout the campaign, players alternate between playing as the Blood Ravens, led by Angelos, the Eldar, led by Maka, and the Orcs, led by Gorguts. All three commanders get caught up in the search for the ancient Eldar artifact. All three desire the spear for different reasons. The Blood Ravens are hoarders of knowledge, the Eldar don't want it falling into the wrong hands, and the Orcs just want it because it stabs things good. The campaign makes playing each faction different enough to be engaging, and there's enough variety in each faction's missions to keep it so. Overall, I would give this game a solid 4 out of 5. I definitely had more fun playing it than I did with the second game, and while I prefer the gameplay of the first game, the focus on a multi-perspective story here is refreshing. The game also had the absolute best AI pathfinding of any of the games. I don't think it deserves the reputation that it has online. I was expecting a horrid experience based on all the reviews I have seen, but I was pleasantly surprised. I wish Relic had not abandoned the game, as I would have loved to see more factions placed into the game, such as my beloved Tau. I will say the final mission, while cool as a narrative, just didn't work for me. The game sticks you with 2 melee champs and a ranged one against a much more mobile enemy who can spam projectiles. And I guess I should address the invisible pink elephant in the room. I only played the campaign for each game and expansion. I didn't play any skirmish matches against AI because that's what the campaign accomplishes, and I didn't play against human players because frankly I suck at these kinds of games competitively. Each game still has a dedicated player base with God knows how many mods having been created. If I was going to recommend which game to play over any other, I would say pick the first Dawn of War. It is still one of my favorite games, and probably tied for my favorite RTS, with the previously mentioned Warcraft 3. Dark Crusade has an almost perfect campaign as far as gameplay goes, allowing for player choice and decent variety, plus an ungodly number of factions to choose from. The game in general has the most expansive campaign, and took up more of my time than the second and third games did combined. So, there we go. That's a wrap on the second Wayward series review. This one series took over 2 months to play and review. It's a side effect of only being able to dedicate an hour or 2 a day to play each game, and the first game took over 30 hours to play through. My next series is hopefully not going to take nearly as long, despite being more than 3 times as many games. The series after that though... oh god.